While the media occasionally glorifies gangs with tales of brotherhood and wholesome anti-heroes, in reality, the majority of gangs are super violent and dangerous. One such example is the Texas Syndicate. Its only guiding principle is straightforward and unforgiving. Work for us until your last breath. Betray us, and you're dead. In today's video, we'll shed light on how the Syndicate operates and the lives of its doomed gang members. Starting off with some history. The Texas Syndicate, also known as Sindicato Tejano, was established in the California prison system during the early 1970s as a reaction to other prison gangs that were preying on inmates who were native to Texas. All thanks to this protection alliance, these hardened criminals rose to prominence as one of the most notorious gangs in California, which was already a hotbed for such mafias. What began as a defense system for the Texan inmates soon spread like wildfire. Over the years, it went from a petty prison syndicate to a force to be reckoned with. In fact, it became so powerful that each time the prisoners returned to Texas after being released from prisons in California, they'd regularly engage in violent behavior, extortion, narcotics-related offenses, assaults, murder, and other serious illegal activities, only to enter the prison system once again to seek protection. They were so influential that the gang members were able to increase their level of control across the entire Texas Department of Criminal Justice prison system, and the Syndicate remains a major threat to the state's department to this day. Not to forget the prison guards, who'd willingly helped the gang inmates during the 80s. You can say the entire system was in on it. The majority of Syndicate members are Texas-born Mexican-American men between the ages of 20 and 40, and there are roughly about 3,800 of them, both inside and outside of prison. The gang claims that they don't murder innocent people, but they do hunt down traitors, particularly those who turn on them, which is kind of true. Authorities claim that the majority of Syndicate's attacks are tit-for-tat strikes against rivals or family members. What's particularly interesting about this gang is that it's unlike any other. It's not just petty crimes and drugs, with badly dressed teens on street corners consuming malt liquor and smoking marijuana. Not at all. They actually operate under a formal, super rigid, militarized management structure with a constitution and strictly established rules. Go against these rules and lose your head. The members are bound by a code of conduct, which enforces loyalty to the Syndicate and active participation in the criminal activities of the TS as soon as you're out of prison. It was the first Texas prison gang to adopt Italian mafia-like traditions, such as strict laws and severe punishments. Oh, and before you decide you've had enough of this lifestyle and it's time for redemption, no members permitted to leave the group. It's for life. Those who work for the Texas Syndicate refer to one another as carnal, which translates to brother, and they're mostly seen flaunting their gang symbol, which is horns, in the form of a tattoo. The Syndicate ensures that the members form close relationships with each other. As they say, bros before family, God and country. It's like one big happy family, minus the happiness, and loads of crime. The gang has committed at least about 100 murders, and this is just a conservative figure. It's likely much higher than that. And of course, every possible offense known to mankind. Who were they? And what brought them to their terrifying fate? Let's have a look at some of the most well-known Texas Syndicate's carnal brothers. First up, Roy Ereda. Although not much is known about when and how Roy joined the Texas Syndicate, which is true for most members because they tend to be low-key, it's a well-known fact that under his direction, the gang developed into one of the most violent and prolific drug trafficking organizations the state has ever seen. The reputed leader of the syndicate had been involved in a criminal conspiracy that included 6 murders, including that of his own gang member, and the trafficking of enormous amounts of cocaine, methamphetamine, and marijuana in the Dallas area. In his most active years, he trafficked hundreds of kilos of cocaine around Texas. Back then, 1 kilo of coke was about $25,000. This is why Ereda was the goal of a large-scale investigation that led to the indictment of 14 Texas Syndicate members who, according to the prosecution, were guilty of up to a dozen murders in the Dallas area and were involved in drug trafficking for more than a decade. The notorious gangster and the leader of a Dallas-based cell was finally handed a life sentence back in 2008 by a federal court. But Ereda didn't seem particularly anxious for a man who would serve at least the next 40 years of his life behind bars. He was just headed to his safe spot. Next up, Arnold Darby. The 62-year-old is one of the few white men ever admitted into the gang, and the oldest surviving member of the original Syndicate soldiers. If he's to be believed, the newer generation of gangsters is more rigid and brutal, and they also willingly attract the attention of law enforcement, in contrast to old school members who were known for maintaining a low profile. Darby is comparatively not as hardcore as others because, well, he's old. And the gang's purpose was very different in his days than it is now. He's done his fair share of criminal activities, which mostly involve drug trafficking, kidnappings, and robberies. Trust us, this is nothing compared to what the other members have been up to. For example, the 32-year-old Mike Mendoza Jr. The Baytown resident is from the same infamous second generation of the Texas Syndicate that the likes of Darby warn us about. Totally brutal, vicious, vengeful, and don't think twice before killing. Mendoza is currently serving a life sentence for murder. Next up, Joaquin Cibrian. The 29-year-old Cibrian had it all going for him in the early 2010s. He was making a pretty good bank, with his illegal activities, of course. He was also quickly climbing the ranks among the Carnal brothers, and had only kept it low-key in terms of his criminal record. That's until he was wanted in connection with the murder of a teenage boy. On the evening of his death, he opened fire and wounded the police officers who were trying to carry out an arrest warrant for Cibrian. The two injured officers soon called for help. The La Jolla Police Department contacted all available specialized teams in the valley. And what followed next was a 3-hour-long shootout with a minimum of 500 rounds exchanged. He had barricaded himself in a house, and after Cibrian made 2 false surrender attempts and constantly misled the police, a SWAT tank barged into the house and a lot of tear gas was fired, forever silencing the gangster. It's said that it was Cibrian's friends who brought him to his final destination before he was taken out. These friends were likely police informants. And that's a wrap for this video. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more. See you in the next one.